Good evening and welcome to episode 297 of the Gersnet Podcast. I'm John McCallum, I'm your host tonight. Gersnet Podcast is the independent Rangers podcast made by fans for fans, where the content is all free. Now, it's not just the podcast we have here at Gersnet. We have a forum, we have articles, there's social media, it's a great history archive. If you enjoy tonight's pod, or if you enjoy the pod in general, we would encourage you to subscribe and share on social media if you wouldn't mind putting word out there. That's how we make all our money, from advertising on social media and on YouTube. That's what's keeping us in the lifestyle we've become accustomed to. Now, before I move on to speak to our guests to talk about today's victory, I just need to have a quick chat with you about our sponsor, who is Forrest Precision Engineering. If you're a regular on Gersnet, you've probably heard us talk about them before. They are a Glasgow-based subcontract engineering company, and they've been a big commercial sponsor of Rangers for many, many years, and we're delighted that they are backing our pod. If you'd like to know more about Forrest Precision Engineering, have a look at their website, which is forrestprecisioneng.com. And if precision engineering is not what you need in your life just now, perhaps you would be more interested in the Forrest Precision Executive Lounge, which is a hospitality area within the main stand, and is available to book. And if you'd like to know more about that, then contact the club at hospitality@rangers.co.uk. So again, thanks to Precision Engineering. I'm joined tonight by a couple of well-kent faces. We've gone old school on Gersnet tonight, I think, bringing in all the established faces for the big games. For the big games, they bring in you too. So it seems apt that on a week where we have been talking about fireworks and flares, we've got three rockets on Gersnet tonight. I'm joined, of course, by by David Fraser and Ross Bennett. Good evening, gentlemen. David, no Pollock yesterday. How did you spend your Saturday?
I went to Home Park, John, to watch Clydebank against.
I was at Home Park yesterday as well.
To see what like bees are going to be. So I was over your neck of the woods, or rough neck of the woods.
Yeah, well, you weren't exactly my neck of the woods, because I went to Home Park with my son yesterday and they watched Clydebank demolish Beef.
So the Arthur League game's been rearranged because they're in cup duty next week, so it was quite fortuitous to see me ahead of next week's game, and you always feel a bit less about Pollock, more about Rangers. So I want to celebrate a League Cup final berth securing victory today.
Absolutely. Ross, it's good to see you again. I don't think I've seen you since you became betrothed in the summer. How's married life treating you and life in general?
Yeah, no, it's all good. I can't say married life is much different to engaged life, but got a wee bit of shiny metal on my hand now, which I've taken a few weeks to get used to. But no, everything's...
Is that your tag?
It's exactly that. It's my sort of warning flag.
Your electronic tag.
But no, look, everything's much rosier today than it was, say, 4 or 5 weeks ago. Certainly
is. Yeah, it certainly is. Yesterday was the anniversary of a couple of very famous dates for Rangers supporters of a certain age. It was the anniversary of our victory over Leeds at Ellen Road in the first ever Champions League, qualified for the first ever Champions League, and it was also the anniversary of a 1-0 victory over Celtic at Ibrox in the league, where a certain Mo Johnston scored the winner in the 88th minute or something like that. Two important games in Rangers history for different reasons. I think we'll look back in years to come today and wonder if perhaps today was the day that the Clement era started for real. David, let me come to you first. Let's talk about the game. 2 changes from Wednesday with Wright by Cantwell and Barisic. Also, Balogun and Lammers both retained their starting places. What were your thoughts when you saw that team line up? Where was it? Were you surprised by those two keeping their places and the other two dropping them, or did you kind of think this is the way that Clement's going just now?
Well, I wasn't surprised that at Balogun and Lammers keeping their place in the side, John. So he's trying to give Sam Lammers a shot in the arm in terms of his confidence. He obviously scored a smashing goal at Dens the other night. So I wasn't surprised to see him keep his place. Same with Liam Balogun. Liam came in on Wednesday night and looked the part. Would I be slightly surprised that Yilmaz dropping out in favour of Borna Barisic? Again, probably not. Borna divides opinion, as does Ridvan. But I think he's went with the experienced head, and he was obviously cognizant of the fact that the ball got knocked over Ridvan's head for Lon Shanklin's cushioned header last weekend. So, Todd Cantwell again. He's coming back to fitness, so there was no real surprise in the starting lineup, and obviously seeing Danilo retain his place was obviously instrumental in how we tend to play under Philip. So no real surprises, and I'm glad that the starting lineup established early authority within the game.
Yeah, absolutely. So a wee bit surprised at Balogun. I thought Davies would come back in. I just assumed they weren't risking Davies the other night and that he'd be fit, and I thought he'd come back in. But to be fair, Balogun had a good game against Dundee, and he showed us something that perhaps we've been missing in terms of a centre half stepping out and moving forward. So perhaps not a huge surprise that he kept his place. David, talking about David Ross. Talking about people who kept their place, although he didn't score today, Danilo, his presence up front, I feel really changes our style of play. We now have a forward who can hold the ball up, who can lay it off, who can take it in a tight space. He's also got wonderful movement, which is something that Dessers just doesn't have. He does not have that. He was fouled for the penalty. He assisted for the second, and really he was involved, I think, in everything good that we did in an attacking sense today. He scored on Wednesday. He scored the winner, of course, last Saturday. We've been critical of, and I think rightly critical of, the club's summer transfer business in Gersnet. But might Danilo prove to be the best bit of business yet?
Yeah, very possibly. I think, first and foremost, he did really well to win that penalty today. He had to be sharp. He was on his toes. He nipped in to a potentially dangerous situation because he could have been really clattered by the goalkeeper. The goalkeeper, I thought, was clumsy in taking him out, but I think actually a lot of credit has to go to Danilo for getting there first and winning the ball and winning the penalty. What I like about Danilo, all of those attributes you listed there, he holds the ball up, he's good on the ball, he's good off the ball, he has an eye for goal, and I think he's probably about a goal every other game now. Didn't score today, but as you say, assisted. But aside from all of that, I actually really like his attitude. Now, obviously, he took a nasty injury scoring up at Ross County. He's come back, and he doesn't seem to have lost any confidence. He seems to have gained in confidence. It was a slow start, and he was probably lumped in with Lammers and Dessers by a lot of Rangers fans, probably myself included, in terms of our assessment of him. And it was probably one where we made a very, very quick judgment and arguably a little overly critical. But he's scoring goals, he's setting up goals. His attitude is it seems to be fantastic. I mean, the cameras picked him up today after the game, sort of singing along to his own song in front of the Union Bears. I was up at the game against Hibs, Clermont's first game, and he was the last one off the pitch. He's really sort of enjoying, I think, the fact that he's got a song, the fact that the fans seem to like him. It just seems that he's kind of buying into it, and I think for Rangers fans that goes a long way. We were all absolutely charmed by Fashion Sakala, despite his lack of ability. Danilo seems to have a similar quality.
Ross, controversial.
But Danilo seems to have a similar quality in terms of he's endearing himself to the fan base, and yet I think he's an upgrade. I think he's an upgrade on what we had. So Yeah, looking at his pedigree, he had a handful of cap appearances for Ajax. Did well at Feyenoord, so he's got a good pedigree. You can see now kind of why there was such a high outlay on him, and I think there's reasons to be optimistic.
And not only, it's interesting you mentioned Sakala, because I was thinking that too, because he plays with a smile on his face, which is something that you haven't seen much of around Ibrox this season. But he plays with a smile on his face. Plus, also, I've noticed post-game, he's also big on God. And again, that's been missing since Sakala left. So maybe a bit of divine intervention is helping the team as well. Danilo has brought that back to us. So fingers crossed. So listen, sticking with Danilo, David, our first goal was obviously a slack back pass, back header. But he anticipated that, and he was on it in a flash. And again, that speed over short distance proved vital. And as Ross said, it was actually quite brave. There's been a bit of talk. Michael Stewart, how he keeps getting employed is beyond me. But Michael Stewart seemed to think perhaps it wasn't a penalty. What was your take on it, on the first goal?
No, I think it's a penalty. I think it's one of those ones where, as a striker, with the angle or the trajectory of the ball, if you nip in front of the goalkeeper, if the goalkeeper's committed, if you get there first, there's every chance you're going to get wiped out. The ref's got no option but to point to the spot. So he was, as Ross mentioned, he was sharp. I like his liveliness. He wants to be involved. He seems to be eager to be, to take part in the game, and I think that's one of the big strings to his bow, certainly from an early appraisal of his abilities within the team. So no, I don't think there's too much to buy to, and I don't think you've seen too much remonstrations for the Hearts players with Nick Walsh as to whether it was a penalty kick. And obviously our pal Willie Collum in the VAR box deemed it wasn't worthy of any kind of prolonged and protracted waiting about until the kick was actually taken. So
yeah, no, I think as you said there, David, the reaction of the Hearts defenders and the Hearts goalkeeper told you everything you needed to know. It was poor from Hearts. It was poor goalkeeping. It was poor defending. But you still have to anticipate that. You still have to get yourself there and you get your foot to the ball before the goalkeeper comes out. And then Tav still has to put away the penalty, and it was pretty calm. It was pretty cool. It was a pressure penalty. It's the cup semi-final. We'd been knocking on the door all first half and nothing to come of it. And he probably doesn't get enough credit for putting that one away. As our co-commentator said during the match, but penalties don't count apparently for right backs if they score them. You don't count them. So maybe we should do that. Even the most biased co-commentator Ross couldn't have found fault with our second goal. Now I'm going to digress slightly. I imagine more than a few eyebrows were raised at half time when Scott Wright came out instead of Cantwell. I know they were in my house. Cantwell had picked up the booking. I thought he'd been playing okay. I think he'd been huffing and puffing a little bit, but he'd been playing okay. But the team had been playing okay. We just couldn't find the back of the net. But he came on and he looked good and he took his goal really well. And I think most of us thought that his time at Rangers had come to an end in the summer. I mean, he pretty much, it was certainly reported that he was off to Turkey, I think, and it looked like he was going to be signing there. But certainly I think most of us didn't think he had much of a future at Rangers. That seems to have changed in the recent times. It's funny what happens when a new manager comes in. What do you think? Does Scott Wright have a future at Rangers?
Yeah, I think he does. I don't think he has a future as a starter. He's a squad player. He's an impact sub. He's consistently better off the bench than he is starting. He seems to love Hampden, because I think that's his first goal since the Scottish Cup final, with both of which were really nicely taken goals. I mean, he's not a goal scorer, really. He said in his post-match interview that he was brought on to try and bring some creativity, and that's exactly what a Scott Wright does. You don't bank on him to score a lot of goals, but you do bank on him to run at defences, try something a bit different. And he's a very different player to Todd Cantwell. I wasn't too surprised to see Cantwell go off. I think, there's a combination of factors. The yellow card, he's coming back from injury, and we've got a pretty big game on Thursday that we probably want people to be fresh for. So I think the combination of those three things, I could see why he would go off at half-time. I've seen there's now articles in the paper about how angry or unhappy Todd Cantwell was at being taken off. So we won a game today because those kinds of articles are appearing. I don't think Scott Wright is the best player we have. He's certainly not going to go down as the Rangers.
It's that kind of astute observation that brings you back onto the pod, Ross.
Scott Wright is not our best player. Scott Wright is not going to go down as a Rangers legend. However, I think in the summer, I suspect he probably had a decision to make. I don't know what team it was out in Turkey, but say it was a mid-table Turkish side. I don't think it was Galatasaray or Fenerbahce or Besiktas. So do I want to go to a mid-table Turkish side, or do I want to stay in Scotland? I presume he's on good money, near to his family, comfortable life, chance of winning silverware every season. I can see why he would turn down going to Turkey, quite frankly. Look, it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up at a Hearts in a couple of years' time. But I think there's a place for him, and I think he showed that today. I think when you are consistently coming up against negative, stuffy teams, I include Hearts in that, by the way, because I don't think they had a clue how to win that game today.
Yeah.
You need to have options of players that can come on and change the game, and that's what I think he is. He, in our last couple of visits to Hampden, he's proved himself to be very, very valuable. So I'd be happy to keep him around.
One thing though, when you score as infrequently as Scott Wright does, you'd think he would have worked on some of his goal-scoring celebrations. Today was just a straight rip-off of Roof and Arfields. And you're looking for more creativity in that front from him, I think, don't you? And I think he just picked the Arfield stuff to annoy you. I think, frankly, I think that was just to remind you of Arfield, and I think he was personally having a wee dig.
Yes, that's fine. What I would say in response is he's clearly not that bright because he can't think of his own celebration. But I don't need him to be bright. If he's, again, he scored a fantastic goal today that put the game to bed. Really, as soon as that second went in, you knew we were through to the final. So he can rip off whoever's celebrations he wants to. He can do the Jean-Claude Darcheville big cheesy grin and salute. He can do whatever he likes. I don't care. Just keep scoring goals at Hampden.
Yeah. I saw Steve Clark. Steve Wright was there as well, probably, but Steve Clark was in the crowd today. Do you think Wright's an outside chance to get in the Scotland squad?
No. I'd say no. I don't think so. I think Steve Clark has his favourites, and I don't think much will change that. And I'm no fan of Steve Clark, but what he's doing is working for the national team, so I don't see the need for him to change it. I don't think a dynamic, attacking, creative winger is what Steve Clark wants or needs. I don't see how he fits into a side of his. So I'd be very surprised.
There you go, David. Apparently, Scott Wright isn't one of Rangers' best players, but let's look at somebody who is potentially one of Rangers' best players. Tavernier's free kick for the third was a thing of beauty. And I think the biggest compliment that I can pay him, David, is that it wasn't really a surprise. We know just how good he is at dead balls. Every team in the league know how good he can be from dead balls. Tav still, mysteriously for me, Tav still gets quite a bit of criticism from some people. And not just opposition, but not just Michael Stewart, but from our own supporters. Where do you sit on the Tav side of things, and where do you think he comes in the pantheon of Rangers greats?
That's a difficult one to answer, John.
Well, that's why you're here, David. And we've got 40 minutes still to go.
Right. I'll try and be succinct.
No. Take as much time as you want.
Right. Okay. James Tavernier obviously divides opinion still to this day, and I think he will until he leaves Rangers, to be honest, John. Assess where he stands, and to use your word, the pantheon of Rangers greats, assuming we do bracket him in the greats section, which I'm not entirely convinced that I do. However, I do categorise him as a Rangers stalwart due to his length of service and his how should I put it, his consistency of performance and his intrinsic value to the teams that he's been a member of. Because let's face it, he has been basically a physical machine for the better part of 6-7 years. He obviously that season where he suffered a knee injury up at Tannadice, I seem to recall, which truncated his season. But to score the number of goals that he's done for a right back, regardless of whether a lot of them are penalties or not, you've still got to stand up and take them, and you've still got to score them. So yeah, I think
still count for exactly the same amount.
Exactly. So I think that the big thing that legislates against James Tavernier being regarded as a bona fide Rangers great is obviously due to the lack of silverware that he's lifted as a player, or as the Rangers captain. Hopefully that might change in the coming season, because I think his dedication merit's been talked about as being one of the better Rangers players of the last 20 years. And obviously there's a lot of competition for that. As far more storied players in Rangers history, even recent history, that would compete with that in the eyes of a lot of supporters. But I think that, certainly, I'll speak for myself and probably yourself, John, insofar as there's a new generation of Rangers supporters that don't necessarily associate the players that we've seen in our time, and Ross's as well, to be fair. So to a lot of Rangers supporters, James Tavernier, in many respects, would tend to be, uppermost in people's minds when regarding themselves as, as good or great Rangers players. So I think he deserves some merit in being in that discussion. And if he lifts more silverware, I think his goals record allied to his amount of appearances would have him in the conversation. Obviously, again, I'm repeating myself here, the lack of silverware that hasn't come his way obviously legislates against him. Is that a fair thing to hold against him? I'm on the fence about that, because obviously, to be considered a Rangers great, you've got to win things. You've got to be known as a serial winner. So earlier this season, I seen elements of his play where I thought that it might have been time to maybe phase him out in terms of being the starting right back. So in the last couple of games, how much you can read into a result, against Dundee at Dens and today at Hampden. I think that some of the ring rustiness that appears to have been shown from his game, I don't know if you guys necessarily agree or the listeners necessarily agree, but he looked as though he'd maybe lost a yard of pace. The last couple of games I've seen him, the sharpness return, and I think that you could, I think it's several players falling in that category. So look, to get back to what you asked me, I think James Tavernier is a solid Rangers player. He deserves respect. I leave the kind of captaincy merits argument to one side. I think just purely based on his, to use modern parlance, his numbers, I think James deserves a fair amount of respect for the Rangers family in terms of where he stands and in terms of being a club stalwart.
Yeah, and I think you put it very well there, David. Ultimately, Rangers greats are judged on a number of factors, but one of them is silverware. One of them is the medals they've won, and the winners' medals. And that's the that's the area in Tav's Rangers career that isn't as strong as a number of others. So how history will judge him, we'll see. And he's still got a few seasons to put a few more medals in there. And I remember having a conversation with somebody a year or two ago now, and they were talking about John Gregg, who I think most Rangers fans see as, if not certainly within the top 2 or 3 Rangers players of all time. But they pointed out that Gregg was at the club where Celtic won their 9 in a row. Gregg was at the club where Rangers were not winning leagues, going long stretches without winning leagues, not winning a great deal, struggling a bit. And he then came through that and captained us to 2 trebles. So, it was a nasty question, because ultimately Tavernier will be judged when he leaves Rangers. And we'll look back, and I think personally, I don't think we'll genuinely see his value until he leaves. I think we've
to say, sorry to cut across.
No, across.
Maybe a way to kind of sum it up would be a straw poll amongst the support about whether he deserves a testimonial or not. Because he's contracted, I think I'm right in saying, to 2026. Which would take him up to.
That would be 10 years.
It'd take him past the decade mark. So, assuming that he sees out his contract and he's still a valued member of the squad, not necessarily the start 11, in the latter part of his contract, it may well be an automatic pick. I don't know. I'd like to think not, given his age. But having said that, if he does hang about and he is still position numbers, if the vast majority of Rangers supporters we tend to think that he deserves a testimonial, then I think that speaks volumes about his standing in the eyes of the Rangers.
Yeah. It was an interesting moment today when he was lining up for the free kick, when he literally walked up to goals and like positioned him and said, right, stand there, duck when I hit it, and then and I actually watched it with my son, and I actually said to him, I said, I think Bassett's going to hit this. I think that's just a ruse to throw the Hearts players, and of course it wasn't, and he did exactly what he said he was going to do, and still Hearts couldn't stop it, and it was a sweetly hit a free kick, as you'll see, and a goal I think that capped off a great performance. Ross, today is that one day of the year where we can celebrate the foiling of a papish plot and do it without anyone criticising us. Bonfire night, Guy Fawkes, all of that. Today we got a penalty given against us, and as everybody knows, Rangers don't get penalties given against us. That's in the rules. Rangers have gone, 54 years or something without a penalty being given against us, according to some people online. And of course, the referee today didn't give it, and then VAR overturned it and awarded Hearts a penalty. What was your take on that? And did the officials get the big decisions right? Now we've had VAR for it's pretty much 12 months now. What's your take on things on that front?
There's a bit to unpack with it today. Did the officials get the big decisions right? There weren't that many big decisions.
It's quite a good-natured game. I thought there'd be a lot more niggle in the game today.
I felt I agree until about 80 minutes, and then I felt something changed in Hearts, and they just.
Do you know what changed? Devlin, come on.
Yeah, I actually said my wife was in the room. She wasn't really watching the game, but I said, he's always been a dirty bastard, him. Because as soon as he came on, he did it. It's almost like he can't help himself. And I remember there was a bit of talk about us trying to sign him about a year ago, or would he be good for us? And he's just a horrible wee player, and he always seems to get booked against us. And so I thought it was a good-natured game up until about 10 minutes to go, and then they seemed to lose a bit of discipline, and yellow cards started flying around. Other decisions that I can remember, I think Todd Cantwell's booking was a bit harsh. I think the the Hearts player kind of bought that a bit with the reaction. I don't think it was a yellow card. I don't have an issue with being a foul, but that's minor in the grand scheme of things. Our penalty, despite what Marvin Bartley says, it was a clear penalty. Theirs.
Should the goalie have gone off for their penalty?
This is where you'll show up my lack of knowledge of the rules. Yeah, but I would have thought, if we're sort of putting a common sense hat on, no. I mean, we were running away from goal. I think the ball was probably running out anyway. I suspect the goalie can show that he was making a genuine attempt to play the ball. I think that's the criteria at the moment. So no, I don't think he needed to go. Their penalty, it's an odd one. Do you know, I actually still don't think there's been a good camera angle of it that decisively shows if there was contact or where the contact was and how much contact there was. It always seems a bit grainy, or I couldn't quite tell. Let's say that there was contact, then it probably, you can't argue with it being a foul. And if it's a foul anywhere on the pitch, it's a foul on the box, then it's a penalty. That's fine. It seems to be the softest of soft. But what frustrates me is that I thought, and again, someone please correct me if I'm wrong, I thought the criteria for VAR intervening on fouls was clear and obvious error. And it's another one that we look at and we can debate this several hours after the game's ended as to whether that should or should not have been a foul. Then by definition, that is not clear or obvious. It's the same with the goal in the Old Firm earlier in the season that was completely wrongly chalked off. That was not a clear and obvious error. And if it's not a clear and obvious error, I thought, I may be wrong, but I thought VAR was only supposed to get involved if it's clear and obvious. So we have fallen now into the territory that everyone was afraid of, which is that the game is being re-refereed, because every decision is being looked at by VAR, regardless of clear and obvious. So that seems to me to be kind of where it's going wrong. I would say we can be a bit more flippant about it today because it didn't impact the game. That was the only way they were ever going to score. And that's all well and good. And if there was contact, you can see why it would be a foul. You can see why it would be a penalty, albeit a soft penalty, and that's fine. But it seems to me that we are missing the remit that VAR was brought in to actually carry out. And that's what I think causes a lot of the frustration. We weren't supposed to have it to re-referee games. We were only supposed to have it to clear up the really bad stuff, and that the referee was still meant to be the referee. And we've gotten away from that a little bit. So I
suspect from the penalty, if the ref had simply waved play on, if he just simply said no penalty, then VAR wouldn't have intervened. But I think it was because he booked the guy sending him off that VAR probably looked at that and said there's a clear and obvious error. Because I don't think the lad dived, which is what he was getting booked for. I don't think he did that. So I suspect that's what it was. David, I wasn't going to ask you this, but I'll ask you now. We've had 12 months of VAR. Are you in the love it or hate it camp?
How long you got?
25 minutes.
Like Ross, I think it's Ross sums it up quite nearly. I think it was supposed to be brought in to clear up clear and obvious errors by the officials, and it's not been. That's not how it's been rolled out. There's been a lot of noise surrounding it, a lot of mistrust about the motivations behind its introduction, I think. Not just amongst supporters, but also amongst the media. Where I'm coming from there is, digressing slightly, it's the game is totally changing, right, before our very eyes. When you see now that it's commonplace that 8-9 minutes of added time gets added to games. You know, it's almost like NFL creep almost to some games. And VAR was just another part of that. I seem to recall during the Russia World Cup that how that was almost like a test run for the use of VAR, and it seemed that seemed like a breath of fresh air at the time. I think how we're obviously a bit late to the party, but now we've got it. Clubs have obviously incurred the cost to install it and have it running. Has the game been improved? I mean, Ross cited there the Dessers incident in the game at Ibrox where Roof's goal was incorrectly chalked off, and it wasn't a clear and obvious error to Don Robertson. I mean, Don Robertson lets everyone, especially if they're playing against Rangers, kick everything above grass level. And he seemed to get involved there at the behest. I think it might have been Nick Walsh actually that was in the VAR room that day, or Andy Dallas. So, but yeah, I'd like to put my progressive hat on, John. I'd like to think that its introduction might be for the greater good. There's obviously the money that's involved in the game these days, even at Scottish level, a relative pittance in the grand scheme when you talk about the top level. If the controversy that surrounds it lessens over time, which doesn't look as if it's going to, necessarily be the case going forward, certainly in the short term. If that lessens over time, then I think it may well turn out to be a good thing. But I think the fact that we are still discussing the merits of its introduction tells a story. And I think that's probably the best way to sum it up. I think we'll be talking about it, if not till the cows come home, but I think we'll be talking about it until its application is, and the consistency of that application is ironed out. And I think we're some way short of that, certainly here. And looking down the road at some of the crazy decisions that we've seen in the last few weeks down by, and they've made a lot of noise in the media about its suspect application. And I think as long as we see stuff like that, then it'll always be a talking point.
Yeah. I hate VAR, I'll be honest with you. I still hate it. I'd get rid of it tomorrow, but I'm not in charge. We've gone down to talking about things I hate when it's been such a nice day, so let me go back again. When I was writing my notes for tonight's pod, David, believe it or not, I write notes for this. I know that will come as a surprise on its own. But I was looking back at one of the last times I was on, which was actually just the September weekend, end of September in Glasgow. And our mood was very different that night. Certain players being booed by the support. The team were being booed by the support. We'd no discernible shape to our team. Our style of play was a challenge to understand, and we were really a chore to watch, David. And that, I think it was Ross that said at the start, it might have been yourself. That was pretty recently. When that was the September weekend, that was like 4, 5, 6 weeks ago. What has Clement done to bring about this change in a relatively short space of time? The first couple, the game against Sparta Prague away, Sparta Prague hammered us for, 50 minutes, 55 minutes, 60 minutes or so. And then we came into the game and actually we finished quite strongly, but, we could have been 2 or 3 down in that game. So, I just kind of looked at it and thought, he's got the same players. He's not going to be able to do anything with these guys. And, he's going to wait to get to January. Maybe get, guys like Lawrence back fit again. Even Danilo at that point, pretty much written off as being a dud. It wasn't feeling him coming back was going to make a massive difference to us. But he has made a change. There's no doubt about it. The last couple of games, it's become quite clear that we have a very different style of play. Do you think that this is just simply new manager bounce, a new voice coming into the changing room, somebody new shouting at them, players all getting a fright and trying to impress? Or do you think he is capable of turning this side into serial winners, David?
No, too early to say, John. I think the early signs have been encouraging. I don't think I'd be alone in saying that. I think it's pretty glaring that they're passing the ball forward more quickly. The speed of the play has increased. I think it's glaring. But that wouldn't be hard. I mean, it was quite, the lethargic kind of rondos to move up the park, move the opposition about the park under McBeal was pretty turgid at the end.
It really was. Yeah.
So I think he's simplified the message. There seems to be a clarity of message to the players. Now, I made reference here when we discussing Tavernier. I think you seen today how much sharper Connor Golson looked. He seems to, there's kind of a lethargy has been lifted. Now, obviously he's come in not so many words, he's alluded to the fact that he obviously questioned the fitness levels of the squad. Now that's obviously going to be difficult to try and improve over the course of the season. Can it be enhanced, or the likelihood of that coming about in the shorter term be enhanced with better training drills? Yeah, of course it can. And I think he's
just on that point, David. Sorry, cut across you on that point, because he has chosen his words carefully, and he's tried not to just make an outright criticism of what he inherited, whilst making an outright criticism of what he inherited. But what I wasn't entirely sure, and I'd be interested in your take on this, was his criticism about the fitness being that how many players had knocks and were carrying injuries, and the length of time it was taking to load injuries, or was it more to do with the conditioning and level of fitness of players, or are those two things actually combined anyway? And I'm wrong to try and differentiate between them. What was your take on that?
Well, I think that goes hand in glove.
Yeah,
John. I think if you don't have the necessary platform of conditioning, then you're going to be more susceptible to niggles. I mean, it stands to reason. I go jogging, if I don't stretch off, especially as when I come back from my 2 mile run, I'm going to feel it.
You're just showing off now, David. Come on.
Well, but look, it stands to reason. I think he's come in and he's seen, leaving aside the fact, whether, Michael Beale's obviously a certain philosophy, which obviously differs from his, to varying degrees. But you do need to have that physical base. I've been quite encouraged by certainly the last week. I mean, the biggest compliment I can pay him is that there's a game-on-game improvement.
Yeah,
that's quite marked to my mind anyway. And everyone is contributing. I mean, Ross discussed Scott Wright at length. Scott Wright's contributing, and the players that we didn't give tuppence for, weeks ago, are at least contributing. You've seen the other night, Sam Lammers, he's scratching for form. Phillips trying to give him confidence, but then he pops up with a smashing goal. And the type of goal where you go, where we heard this phrase before, there's a player in there. Possibly. Ross's favourite, Mr. Sakala, who, but I've just thinking when Ross mentioned that as well, Fashion did contribute with goals that we haven't seen to have replaced. A lot of goals, when him and Tony Cholak's goals go at the side, and if it wasn't for Abdallah Sima, who's not our player, where would our season be up to now? So, no, to get back to Philip, I think he's get back to basics. I mean, I've been on a few pods earlier in the season, and we were discussing Mick's take on life, and I thought he was, regardless of other people see him as an academic and a school teacher and all the rest of it, he seemed to overcomplicate the message. I think this man has come in. He's said the presence of mind. There's a big difference between being a coach and being a manager. It's a lot of people, and a lot of that's actually seeing, what's available to you, the resources available to you, and being pragmatic. It's all very well, having this grandiose scheme and trying to put it in place and trying to, inculcate it in a group of players by repetition. It can take months. If you get lucky with the quality of play you've got, it could take weeks, and you can get off to a flyer. But I think the overriding aspect I take from certainly Philip's brief time in charge, 5 games, undefeated, 4 victories. As it seems that he's got a clarity of message, and I think his post-match comments I listened to, and he says that he's got leaders in the dressing room. So he's trying to get a feeling for getting guys on his side. And he's saying that they're getting on the page, in terms of the story. So I think he's simplified it, and I think so far so good. And the upcoming game during the week against Sparta will tell us how far we've come in this short space of time. So, more power to him. And it looks as though we've got purpose now, and we look as though we can create and we can be dangerous. Whereas there was times we were watching a Michael Beale side where Rangers could have been playing to 10 o'clock at night and they couldn't have scored, or they couldn't have fashioned, clear-cut chances where it was easy to score and miss. Now it looks as though there's a bit of potency. I think there's still to come. It's early days, but it's there's reasons for cautious optimism. Put it that way.
That's it. Cautious optimism is a very good way of putting it. He has a presence. When he speaks, you listen. He has a presence. His economy of words, and that's not something I've ever been accused of. But his economy of words is very interesting because of that. You listen to what he says. He has a point to everything he says. He says it for a reason, and I think, and maybe unfairly, I think Beale was often criticised because he spoke too much. He said a lot without saying a great deal at times, and I think that simplifying the message, as you said, David, is sometimes what you need to do with professional football players. Don't make this too complicated. Try and keep this as simple as you can.
They're more economical with the ball, John. I don't know if that's glaring to me. There's needless work on the ball under Michael Beale has been, if not eradicated, it's been massively reduced in the short time he's been here. So that you would, I think he'd be forgiven for extrapolating and joining the dots and saying, he's obviously simplifying the message and he's trying to, round pegs for round holes, and don't overcomplicate the message, and just, keep things relatively simple and then build, as, you make solid foundations, and then, we can maybe, how would you put it? You can embellish, shall we say, as you get results and you get confidence, and he knows all too well, having been in a similar situation. Only a couple of sides that can really make a dent in the Belgian league, that he knows that he's not got much room for error, and he's got to, he can't afford any slip-ups before the next Old Firm game at Parkhead. So, let's just hope that he keeps going in a similar vein, and the players deliver for him.
Yeah, it's interesting because you kind of touched upon it there because of what he said afterwards. The senior players, Goldson, Lundstrom, Tav, Butland, these guys are playing well. These guys have suddenly, I think, I don't know if it was yourself or Ross that mentioned that, Goldson had a good game today. Goldson played well during the week. Goldson's always, he's always a 7, 8 out of 10, but earlier in the season there was mistakes creeping in and things. And I'm assuming it's deliberate. You get the senior players on side, and then that certainly helps you make any changes you need to make. But it's certainly a clever thing to do, because that's if those are the guys controlling the dressing room, and that's what he needed to change right away. So like you don't want to get carried away. We've been here before. Van Bronckhorst came in, and very quickly we all felt, wow, this is great. The style of football we're playing, and getting to European finals. And it fell apart quite quickly after that. And then we saw a similar thing with Beale. I mean, lest we forget, he did pretty well at the start. The team was playing well and competitive. And again, but unfortunately, it all kind of fell apart. So let's see. We're cautious optimism is, I think, that's the watchword. I think we'll go forward with that. Okay, I'm going to change the subject. Let's move on from today. Just pick up on something that happened through the week. There was a lot of talk of flares and pyrotechnics. And I know David and I, when we hear talk of flares, we're assuming that it's about fashion. We're assuming they're talking about the trousers that perhaps neither of us have worn for 3 or 4 decades. But of course, it wasn't that. It's about the pyrotechnics. The game was held up on Wednesday. Dundee Football Club, the police, the SPFL have all criticised Rangers for it. Most journalists in the land have had a go at us. And I read on Thursday or Friday that there's going to be a government summit on the subject. A summit is much more important than a meeting. A meeting is a minor thing. We're going to have a summit about it because clearly there's nothing else going on in the world for them to talk about. Ross, I'll come to you first, but I'm going to speak to both of you about this. Where do you stand on this? Where do you stand in the whole pyrotechnics at the match and things of that ilk? Where are you on that?
Probably straight down the middle. Shouldn't have done it. Shouldn't do it. It's not the end of the world. Of course, it is dangerous, but potentially dangerous. I mean, pyrotechnics and flares and the like that are happening at football grounds all over the world on a weekly basis, and the reports of people actually exploding are very rare. So
spontaneous combustion remains rare, yes.
Yeah, so potentially dangerous. Potentially dangerous, more so in the hands of idiots who can throw them or fire them off in a certain direction. Thankfully, that is very rare. But you can, of course, see why they have no place at football. Does look good, I have to admit. The photos from Dens looked fantastic.
I have to say, my 17-year-old son said that is the best picture he's ever seen of Scottish football.
Yeah.
Now, he's maybe a bit more of the age group that would be impressed by those types of things, but, his voice is as valid as mine, I suppose.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things there as well. He's also of a demographic that Rangers need to try and capture and hold because it's so much easier nowadays to support Man City or Real Madrid or whoever. So it's difficult because they shouldn't do it. They shouldn't be there. They shouldn't have been able to get that many flares in. If it's, and certainly, by the way, the game had been delayed for 45 minutes, so it's not as if the security staff were in a rush to get people into their seats. They had a bit of time. They could have done a few more checks. No, it shouldn't have happened, and it shouldn't happen. But it's not the end of the world. It's not as big a problem as is being made out. And I think to have a summit about it, which I presume is just a meeting with catering.
It's much more important than that, Ross. How cynical.
What a waste of time. What are a group of politicians who don't go to football matches?
Well,
what are they going to
Rangers
achieve?
Games.
No, of course not. What are you going to achieve sitting in a meeting room in Holyrood saying how badly behaved some 18-year-old boys were? I mean, that I think is just pathetic at a time where there's so much else going on in Scotland, in the UK, in the world. To have a government summit, to have people's time wasted to discuss that. And I imagine if ever the minutes of that summit were made public, the minutes would say, "Oh, that's terrible. The flares, that's really awful. Nothing we can do about it, though." Scottish football, also on a sort of a wider point, Scottish football doesn't have a lot going for it. So I can see why fans would try and create a bit more excitement and make it look a bit more glamorous and try and make us, we also, I think, we being Scottish football fans, like to try and differentiate ourselves from England as much as possible. The Premier League is now a tourist attraction. You see that with the half and half scarves and the tickets going for £500 to a match to sit in the front row and get a selfie. And we are trying, I think, to differentiate ourselves and show that we're a much more pure product. We're a much more probably old-fashioned product and a more, maybe a slightly grittier product. And I think in a lot of ways that there's not just Rangers, but there's maybe it's ultras groups or whatever around lots of clubs in Scotland that are trying to almost make our fan culture a bit more European and or South American. it's a bit more wild, it's a bit more exciting, and it's so different to that sanitized product that you have down the road. So it's a bit, I think it also stems from a bit of a rejection of Premier League and consumerism and the whole against modern football thing. So it's a long-winded way of kind of saying it's daft and they shouldn't do it, and it is dangerous. I can see why they do it. And if they're doing it, we're talking about 16 to 25-year-old lads. A bunch of politicians telling them to stop is not going to stop them. So it's not the end of the world, and I'm not going to get too upset about it.
Yeah. David, you said earlier, like me, you were at Home Park yesterday, in which case you would have seen that there are the Bankies Ultras who had their drum on their flags yesterday. There's not too many of them, and I don't think any of them had flares. But where do you kind of stand in this, David? You're of a similar age to me. You can remember when 16 to 20-year-old males going to football went for a fight, and that was what you did as part of the football experience. And thankfully, that side of it seems to have changed a little bit, and they divert themselves into the Union Bears and these kind of things. And I have to say, without them, Ibrox would be very, very quiet. That again is a thing that's changed from when I was going to Rangers games, and at that age group. Where do you stand in this, David? You're a curmudgeonly old guy like me.
I'm going to be boring here. I'm down the middle at Ross. It's obviously a spectacle. It's obviously a potential hazard. It's a difficult one. I can see why your son thought it was quite something to see, and there will be, there'll be pictures getting being sold around the various blats of the world, showing that in their sports sections, I dare say. So, does that raise the profile of Scottish football in a good way? Probably not. If you depend on what hat you're putting on. If you're putting on your middle-aged Melvin hat, then probably not. If you're putting on your young team hat, then undoubtedly yes. It's a difficult one. If I could digress slightly and take the political side of it, it seems you could put the kettle on for Rangers instigating a government summit. Other clubs who are far more obnoxious in terms of what what their fans groups do as a spectacle, seemingly don't merit this kind of scrutiny. So there's that side to it, which is pretty boring. And I mean, we've been long enough in the tooth, the three of us, to know that that's sadly a very, very tedious side to Scottish society, far less the Scottish football scene. I've been at various games throughout my footballing supporting life, and sometimes flag waving can be as much of a health hazard, taking out eyes and what have you, than flares that are obviously, have a bit more of a in your uppermost in your mind danger, where you've obviously got to be, quite circumspect about how you wave them about. It's a hard one, John. I would tend to think if no one's getting injured and they're not setting off fire alarms, obviously the Bob Shankly stand at Dens Park is quite a small enclosed space, but I seem to recall that the Union Bears had a similarly spectacular pyro effort at Easter Road last season, which obviously didn't trigger said fire alarms and didn't stop games and what have you. So it's difficult. I'm going to sound completely irresponsible here, but if no one's hurt, there's that you're not kicking flares into fans in the manner that a certain former Dundee player did, then I don't see the harm in it. But as Ross rightly said, I mean, to be serious for a second, and it's obviously it can present a hazard, especially the police and the emergency services. So, it's a hard one. The manager's come out and said that he doesn't really. He'd prefer it not to be there, but he's obviously saying that with his politicians' hat on. So we'll see what comes about. It wouldn't surprise me if Rangers were singled out in it. However, equally, I'd like to think that common sense would be applied, and that some sort of accommodation, the softly approach, where fans aren't demonised any more than they've been up to now in the current climate of Scottish football, and there's maybe a bit more discretion is exercised by the ultras groups, shall we say, across the board, not just with regards to Rangers.
Yeah, I did feel that I thought it was a bit handy to have a go at Rangers supporters when there's perhaps been some other groups of Scottish team supporters who have been significantly more offensive in recent times. But anyway, we'll see. I mean, the thing about it is, it is already illegal. You're not supposed to bring these into football grounds. There's no point in having a summit. It's a stupid thing. It's a thing done for show. The police already have powers. The stewards already have powers. They can take these from people. They can stop them coming in. The fact they didn't is embarrassing for Dundee, and it's embarrassing for the police of Dundee. At the same time, it looked great. And it's certainly the most exciting thing that's happened in Dundee since Paul Brun won the Pools. It looked amazing, and I suspect they'll be a little more circumspect for a wee while with the flares. But there was that occasion, I think it was before, I can't remember, was it maybe before the Dortmund game or maybe before the Leipzig game, where they went along the Clyde. And they let the flares. I mean, I didn't see it live, but I saw it. Somebody videoed it and showed it, and it went along both sides of the Clyde. It looked amazing. It really was a spectacle, and I think you have to weigh these things up, as Ross rightly points out. Scottish football, even today, that wasn't. The Hearts End wasn't sold out. They have to do something to increase the spectacle, and if something can be done around there, or there's a way of doing that doesn't cause danger for people, and I would be all for it. Look, very, very quickly, we're running out of time. A big game through the week, guys. Sparta Prague at home. That'll be a much harder challenge than today's game or Wednesday nights. Very quickly, what's your mood going into this? Another big European night at Ibrox, potentially the pivotal game in the group. What's your mood going into it, David? What's your feeling?
All right, let Ross have a go.
I'm going to ask him as well, don't worry.
All right, what's my mood? After today's results, again, I'll be quietly optimistic. I read during the week there that Sparta are expected to have a couple of their mainstays out of the team. Whether that's mind games and stories being planted, I don't know. But Rangers are going in the right direction. The mood amongst the support, more importantly, is the buoyancy levels are increasing game on game. So I'd like to think that the fans will turn up and the players will turn up, John, and we can get a result. Obviously, if we win our next two home games, then we're obviously going to be guaranteed football after Christmas. So it's all to play for. And to hark back to a couple of Thursdays back. Obviously, we made Sparta Prague look like Real Madrid on roids for 50 minutes. And certainly 45 anyway. And the manager obviously, get the iPads out and showed the players what they were doing wrong. And they obviously, he nailed that down quite quickly. So similarly, he's obviously learned in the. Having seen Hearts up close, they managed to kind of limit Lawrence Shankland to very, very little participation in the game today. So, if that's anything to go by, then I'd like to think that we could possibly look forward to a positive result on Thursday night.
Ross, Very quickly, positive, negative, or are you still down the middle?
No, I'm fairly confident actually. As has been said already tonight, we are getting better game by game, and you can literally see the improvements every single game. So I don't think we've got anything to fear. I think we let ourselves down, of course, against Limassol, but we are still in a strong position. There's no reason to fear Sparta Prague. Obviously we got a good result against them a couple of years ago. I don't think they're necessarily any better than they were back then. I think we have every right to feel optimistic going into this.
There you go. So, I've got to be honest with you, I'm not optimistic. I'm never optimistic, but I tell you what I am, I'm looking forward to it. And I wasn't looking forward to games 5-6 weeks ago. And I'm looking forward to seeing Rangers play again just now. And I think that's the biggest compliment I can pay to Clement. Guys, thanks for giving up your Sunday night and coming along and joining us today and saying my inanities. Just remains for me to just remind everybody that Gersnet, if you are watching live and you want to watch again to catch up on all those little bits that you missed, Acast, iTunes, YouTube, Castbox, Stitcher or Spotify. There will be a pod next Friday. And there will be a pod next Sunday. I said I did preparation for this. One of the things I didn't prepare for was to find out who will be presenting those pods. I don't have a clue who's doing it. So follow Frankie on Gersnet on Twitter, and he'll give you updates on that. And I suspect, although again I'm not 100% sure, but I suspect there will probably be a pre and post match pod around the Sparta game. And let's hope we're all smiling for that. Lastly, if I can just thank Forrest Precision Engineering again for their support, and to David and Ross for joining me tonight. Thanks very much, guys, and I hope we keep smiling for the rest of the week.